Good evening, everyone. I call the June 15th, 2022 Apple Valley Planning Commission meeting to order. The first item of business is the approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Madam Chair, no changes to the agenda from staff, except there is, related to the public hearing, item 4A, there was some additional commentary that came in that was not in the package, and you have copies of that in front of you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any changes?
Move approval. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Schindler, seconded by Commissioner Scanlon. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, nay. Motion carries. The next item of business is the approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are considered routine and will be enacted with a single motion without discussion unless a commissioner or citizen requests to have any item separately considered. It will then be moved to the land use action items for consideration. 3A, approved minutes of May 18th, 2022, regular meeting. What's the pleasure of the commission?
Madam Chair, recommend approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
That was moved by Commissioner Scanlon and seconded by Commissioner Mahowald. Discussions? If not, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Oppose? Nay. Motion carries. The next item of business brings us to item number 4, public hearings. 4A, Losinski Addition. I will open the public hearing. We will now open the public hearing for agenda item 4A. The affidavit of publication for the notice of public hearing is available for inspection in the planning department. Everyone wishing to speak at this public hearing should be sure to fill out the attendance roster, or, if virtually, register with the meeting organizer. Include names and addresses so the accurate records can be maintained. We will begin the procedure with a brief presentation by city staff, followed by a presentation by the petitioner of the hearing. Upon the conclusion of the presentation, city staff will be asked to comment on the proposal's conformance with pertinent regulations and policies. After that, comments will be taken from the general public. And we have planner Kathy Bodmer.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners. As the Chair said, this is a request to review the Losinski Addition. The petitioners of this request are the City of Apple Valley and Robert C. and Evelyn Losinski. The Losinski property is located at 400 Reflection Road on the west side of the city near Lake Alamagnet. A trail is located across the rear of their yard. And it provides a walking path between Holyoke Lane and Reflection Road. As part of last year's street improvement project, there was a trail that's on the property that was improved, brought up to current standards. But as the city was working with the property owners expressed concern that they had already given the city a trail drainage and utility easement, but they were concerned that they remained the underlying property owner. And they were concerned that the trail might make them more vulnerable to liability issues. So what they are requesting is to be able to subdivide the property by preliminary plat to create 2 parcels. Lot 1 would be the parcel where the home would be located, and then Outlot A is a very small parcel that would be set up for trail purposes and dedicated to the city. The property is zoned R3, single-family residential with a minimum lot size of 11,000 square feet. And the property is also within the Shoreland Overlay Zoning District because the property is within 1,000 feet of the shoreland of Lake Alamagnet. When you have a overlay zoning district, both zoning districts work together. You take the requirements of the more restrictive of the two zones, and all of those requirements are met. Lot area, lot width, maximum impervious coverage, all those standards are met with this preliminary plat. So this shows the subdivision of the property. Again, the home would remain on the main property, and then the trail property that's created would be dedicated to the city. Trail construction is completed. There's no more work to be done. That was kind of a question that you'll see with some of the correspondence. Folks were kind of, you just worked on this, so what are you doing? So it's just kind of a cleanup ownership thing for the owners to kind of relieve them of responsibility. So this is the plan, the construction plan. And then this is the completed trail photo. I was out there today and grass is in and new shrubs and trees have been planted. So it's kind of just a more of a cleanup part of it, more of a cleanup project for the city to work with the property owner, alleviate their concern with regard to having trail on their property. So, Madam Chair, the staff is recommending opening the public hearing, receiving comments, and closing the public hearing. Normally, the Planning Commission does not take action on the same night as the item's public hearing. But in this case, because it's a fairly simple request, and we've been able to answer most of the questions of folks that have been writing in and inquiring, if the Planning Commission is comfortable, they may wish to take action this evening. And with that, I could stand for questions if there are any.
Commissioners, any questions?
I guess the passage also crosses other residents. Is that accurate?
No, actually, and that's kind of a quirk of this piece of property.
Okay.
Let's see if I don't think I have a view that's close enough to see that. What's happening is the right-of-way, instead of being kind of a standard cul-de-sac, is actually following the red line. So the red line on this side and the red line on this side is all right-of-way. So it's
Okay.
actually in the city's possession right now.
Thank you.
Kathy, can you go back to that picture that shows the sidewalk there?
Sure.
So is there land on the left or on the right, or which one? Is it through their land completely?
This is through their land. Jody, are you able to help to orient us? I don't know if the house is on the right or the left. I'm not sure where this picture was taken, on which side. Is there a specific, I apologize, probably not very well oriented, but.
It appears to be on the left.
Are you the Losinskis?
Yes.
No? Okay. So they're on the left, okay.
Yep.
So on the right was the city's property already then? Or to make the trail like that, or did they no, they didn't donate, right?
No, so the city already had trail and drainage and utility easement. So the new property picks up everything, and to the south is an adjacent property, residential property.
Okay,
So it butts up to a existing residential lot.
thank you. Anybody else, any questions? Okay, does the applicant like to speak at all if they're here? No? Okay. So no more comments. Is there any comments with the virtual organizer? Is there anybody in the queue?
Mr. Chair, there is no one who would like to speak.
There's no one. Do I have a motion?
Can you close the hearing?
I do. If there are no further comments, I will close this public hearing. It is the policy of the Planning Commission not to act on an item on the same night as its public hearing. The Planning Commission will weigh all comments and information received tonight in its deliberations as future meetings. This item will continue to appear on future Planning Commission agendas until a recommendation on the petition can be forwarded to the City Council, although tonight we are having an action requested.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the subdivision by preliminary plat of Losinski Addition as outlined in the staff report dated June 15th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, that was approved, or a motion made by Commissioner Schindler, too many S's here, and seconded by Commissioner Scanlon.
Other way.
Other way around. Scanlon and Schindler.
There you go.
See, I said too many S's. If everybody is in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Great,
Thank you, Kathy.
thank you.
Moving on to item number 5 is land use action items. 5A, Apple Valley Commerce Second Edition, and again, that's with planner Kathy Bodmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So, Madam Chair, this is a request. The petitioners are Skinnell Properties, number 281 LLC, and Menard, Inc. The two parties own approximately 21 acres of land in the southwest corner of Johnny Cake Ridge Road and 147th Street. In 2020 and 2021, Skinnell moved forward with a request for a development of the 8.4 acre property right on the corner for a 117,000 square foot, what they said at the time was a spec industrial building. Different multiple tenant users in the building. Since that time, Skinnell has worked with a client who is interested in the site, but would like to have additional land for the operation of their business. So they approached Skinnell, asked if it would be possible to add property to the 8.4 acre site, and that is part of what is being requested this evening. So in order to increase the size of that property and get it ready for this new development, the actions requested would be subdivision by preliminary plat, zoning amendments to align zoning districts with new property lines, conditional use permit for open storage of delivery vehicles, and then site plan review building permit authorization of a 117,600 square foot industrial office warehouse building. The 2040 comprehensive plan guides the three properties, the 21 acres for I&D, industrial development. And the zoning on the property currently follows the ownership. So in other words, the Skinnell property is currently zoned I2, and the Menard property is zoned PD 1053. What's requested is, as the property line is shifted south, that the zoning districts be realigned to match the new property boundaries. So the existing conditions, the 8.4 acre parcel is a former concrete scrap landfill site. During 2021, it was graded, reclaimed, and that was due to some funding that was received through the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, their contamination cleanup grant program. The preliminary plat then shows the subdivision. There are 3 existing lots, and then under the new subdivision, there would be 3 lots, just kind of reworked to make the plans work for all the parties. So what we've got is 16 acres for Skinnell, 3 acres then would be left for Menard, and then 1.8 acres would be set up as part of a drainage pond, and that would be dedicated to the city. Removals, not much to say here. The site is fairly flat after that reclamation last summer. More work will need to be done because the building pad shifts to the west. One of the things the petitioner will do is shifting the drive apron along Fernando to the south. So that's that very kind of small project, inconsequential. So the site plan then shows the layout of the 117,600 square foot building. So the size of the building is nearly identical to what was approved last year and the year before. The front of the building faces north, with the visitor and staff parking in the north and the northwest sides of the site. A 3,400 square foot maintenance building is shown. That would be a maintenance building for the trucks, repair, and maintenance of the vehicles. The building itself is shown to have rear loading dock doors on the south and the east sides of the building. Access to the site would be the same as previously approved, one north to 147th, one to the west from Fernando Avenue. Parking and for staff and visitors, as I mentioned, 112 parking spaces are shown for this layout. For a building of this size, 177 spaces are required. So they're quite a bit short, but they are showing a number of proof of parking spaces. The number of proof of parking is 94. That brings them up to 206. We will need to work with them. They do need to pave additional parking spaces to bring that number up. Kind of a small detail, but the site can accommodate that. Again, with the dock doors, one of the things that's important here is that the city code states that anytime a building has dock doors facing a public street, it has to meet two requirements. One, the docks, including the maneuvering area, have to be a minimum of 100 feet from the right-of-way line. And then secondly, a 40-foot landscaped area with berming and landscaping is required to provide screening for that area. The setbacks in the berming and the landscape treatment all look to meet those requirements. One of the things that's a little bit strange about this site is that dock doors don't technically face Fernando, but they certainly will be visible from Fernando. So that's something that the petitioner has been addressing, keeping an eye on. The other thing is that they are requesting a conditional use permit for storage of vehicles in the south lot. What they are requesting is to be able to have 152 vehicles, delivery vehicles, which would include semi-trucks, tractors and trailers, box trucks, step vans, and similar type equipment. In order to do that, they are showing that the site would be fenced with 8-foot tall privacy fencing. And actually, they're using a combination treatment of privacy fencing, berming, and landscaping to help really help screen those views. Perspective drawings are included in the staff report that kind of help show the effectiveness of that. One of the things staff is a little bit concerned about is there is just the smallest of gaps right along here where there may be an easy view of the dock door, so we'll continue to work with the petitioner on that. A conditional use is generally a permitted use in a zoning district, provided certain reasonable conditions are met. In this case, staff is proposing to set up the CUP with conditions like only storage of vehicles would be permitted, no inoperable vehicles, no debris, no inventory, and then stored within the striped areas of the lot, that the lot remain open for fire access around the building. Grading plan was reviewed by the city engineer and his staff. Some additional soil correction, as I mentioned, will be needed to shift the building to the west, so we will likely see that this summer. No, there are no significant outstanding issues. Again, the site is pretty flat, but when you go out there, you do see a couple of piles of excess material. Some of that, I suspect, will be used in the site berming. Water, sanitary, sewer, again, reviewed by city engineer. No significant outstanding issues related to that at this time. Storm sewer, the storm sewer is designed so that it's collected and then deposited in the city, what will become the city stormwater maintenance basin. A recommended condition of approval will be that the civil plans are subject to final review and approval by the city engineer. So that gives him the opportunity to work on elevations and really the real detailed pieces of the project as it moves forward into building permit. One thing that I did want to mention is the city engineer, his June 10th memo is a part of the staff report. And in that, there are some comments related to the traffic study. He was able to get that updated. The traffic study finds that traffic will increase over what was modeled previously for the earlier, the phase one or the first edition of the building. The traffic will increase in the AM peak and the PM peak, but the engineer says existing traffic controls and geometry are sufficient to meet the needs. In other words, no changes are needed to area streets or intersections to accommodate the increased traffic. Landscape plan. Three things kind of impact the landscape plan. One, the minimum requirement. They must install landscaping at 1.5% of the value of construction of the building, so they are reviewing that requirement. As we discussed, they do need to do the extra treatment of screening the dock doors. And then third, because of the outdoor storage area, you see additional treatment along and I can't get the mouse to work, so I'll quit fiddling with it. But I think you can see kind of the gap that staff has identified as kind of an issue. What the city engineer has pointed out is there still is the 8-foot privacy fence, so that should help to screen. So we will be looking for we would like to see one more kind of view of the building across the pond, and I know that they are working on that. So floor plan, staff area on the west side of the building, 10,500 square feet. That'll be the location of offices, break rooms, training. Otherwise, the whole rest of the building will be used for warehouse and distribution. The exterior of the building, concrete tip-up panels, 40-foot decorative vertical panels on the end to kind of give a little bit of relief and interest. And then the balance of the building is 37 feet tall. The building materials for the maintenance building were updated, again, to better reflect the materials that are being used on the main building. So the two color panels plus the color treatment. The public hearing for this item was held at the Planning Commission's May 4 meeting. 3 issues were kind of identified. Maintenance garage exterior materials. There was a concern about that. The petitioners did address it. Landscaping on the west side of the site under the previous plan, the landscaping was really lacking on that west side, and so they've done a good job of dealing with that. And then lastly, there was a concern about building materials of the fence, and will it become a long-term maintenance concern? The materials show that the fencing will be a wrought iron looking fence, and it's actually a steel security fence. And then the privacy fence will be a vinyl panelized fencing system. So with that, Madam Chair, staff is recommending approval of the project with 4 actions and then several conditions. If the commission would like, I could go through these, or they're available in the staff report. No changes have been made.
Sure. Any questions for Kathy? Sure. Commissioner Scanlon?
Kathy, I had one question. With your memo of April 13th, there was also a memo attached from the fire marshal, and there was some recommendations or things he was looking for there. Is that covered on your first page where it talks about the special fire protection system and so forth?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Scanlon, one of his primary concerns was this connection right here, making sure that they had full circle loop around the building. And I think then the requirement that they have access, clear paths, that there aren't vehicles in the way was another important consideration.
Okay, so that was covered. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any others? Is the petitioner here? Would they like to speak?
Evening, Madam and Commissioners. Yeah, Kathy did a wonderful job kind of explaining the project. Hopefully from the last time we were here a month or so ago, you've seen some of the changes, mainly to the landscaping. Added quite a bit on the southern side of the lot, added on the west side. Again, on the west side of the building, we weren't trying to cut any corners, more or less just because there was some discussion about potential expansion of auto parking for the tenant. At this point in time, as Kathy kind of mentioned, it's not required, but we have the ability to expand in the future. We have plantings in that location on the west side of the building there now when we planned for it. It's just we didn't plan for it, a month ago because we were kind of working through some of those. Yeah, as I mentioned, Kathy did a great job explaining it, and open to any questions that you may have.
Sure. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for him? Sure. Commissioner?
Madam Chair, just there's, I think, 2 things that Kathy kind of highlighted. The one with the additional paving, and then the other one was with the screening, especially on the west side, if you have any concerns with working with staff to resolve those concerns that they have?
No, so we've begun to work through that. We've, on the southwest side of that pond, we've started to place some plantings and trying to figure out the best spot to screen that area. Certainly some challenges with the elevation, the grading changes, but yeah, Kathy's been great to work with, and we'll continue to work through all those challenges.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
And did I hear correctly, it's about 145 employees? Or how many employees?
Yeah, that is about right.
In there?
Yep.
Nice. Anybody else have any questions for him? Guess not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much.
What is the pleasure of the commissioners?
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the rezoning of Lot 1 and 2, Block 1, and Outlot A, Apple Valley Commerce Edition, in accordance with the attached rezoning map as outlined in staff report.
Second.
Okay, that was a motion by Commissioner Scanlon and seconded by Commissioner Schindler. Any comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the subdivision by preliminary plat of the Apple Valley Commerce Second Edition, subject to items 1 through 7 as outlined in staff report.
Second.
That was motion by Commissioner Scanlon and seconded by Commissioner Schindler. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of a conditional use permit for open outdoor storage of trucks, trailers, and similar vehicles, subject to items 1 through 7 as outlined in staff report.
Second.
It was motioned by, again, Commissioner Scanlon, seconded by Commissioner Schindler. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, nay. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the site plan building permit authorization for construction of a 117,600 square foot warehouse distribution building, subject to the following conditions, items 1 through 6, as outlined in staff report.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Scanlon, seconded by Commissioner Schindler. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Nay would be opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, under land use, action items is number 5B, Fire Station number 2, site plan and building permit authorization, and that is Alex Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. At this meeting, the Planning Commission is not being asked to take action, as it is not typical for the Planning Commission to take action on the on the evening that an item is being introduced, but I do want to briefly go over the 4 actions that Planning Commission is being requested of in the future. The first, Planning Commission doesn't do as often. It's actually a resolution of the Planning Commission with a finding of compliance to the comprehensive plan. This is done, as it's explained in your staff report, for large capital expenditures, property disposition and acquisition. The second would be 2 site variances for impervious surface, building coverage and building height. And the third is for a site plan building permit authorization for a 30,111 square foot fire station. The site, as noted on the previous slide, is at 13995 Galaxy Avenue, which is in the northwest corner of 140th and Galaxy Avenue. The existing site has a fire station already located on it, fire station number 2. Staff report notes that the site was originally built in around 1979 with a large addition in 2003. The site will be required to have a final plat in the future. That is not something the Planning Commission reviews. The final bullet noted on this slide is that the aerial photos do show that there is a separate parcel there that is being cleaned up as part of that final plat, as there was right-of-way along 140th that was vacated back in 2002. The site is zoned for institutional uses, which would include a fire station, municipal buildings, parks, religious institutions, etc. The staff report goes into the size and dimensions of typical institutional sites that help address some of the concerns with the building coverage. Typically, with schools, religious institutions, and city facilities, including parks, they're very large lots. While this one does meet the minimum lot size requirements, it is a smaller lot for a institutional site, and it is only a 1% building coverage increase. I'll go into that a little bit more, but essentially building coverage had multiple different reasons for being within our code, one of which is stormwater, which we will address later. Additionally, the maximum building height is 40 feet. I will show some elevations later on in the presentation that show why the applicant, the City of Apple Valley Fire Department, is seeking for a 2-foot variance. The existing conditions of demolition, the fire station will come down within sections, or is proposed to be demolished within sections so that service is not interrupted, with the 2003 addition occurring first, leaving the bays open for second. The access points I want to call attention to on this slide because they are very close to the intersection. All of the access points to the site will be moved further away from the intersection, which is a site improvement. Additionally, and I already went into that it was built largely in the 1979 and expanded in 2003. This is a slightly out-of-date drawing, but it does show the proposed versus existing. The key aspects to take away from this are that the existing building does not meet site setbacks either to the south or to the south. The proposed building does meet all building setbacks, however, it is substantially larger. The other piece that I already started to note is the access points. I'm sorry, the mouse is a little sticky. The access points are now further away from the intersection, providing for a safer interaction for the fire trucks as they leave the site. The site was designed with a number of aspects in mind that they've learned from the existing site. One of the key ones being cut-through traffic along Galaxy. They've tried to diminish that by the location of the building, not providing clear sight lines. There's still a large amount of open space on the site. They've reduced the total number of access points onto our roadways, which is always encouraged, particularly when near intersections. And while the building coverage and site coverage has been increased, I will go into how that is treated through stormwater in future slides. And it's not showing up very well. I've tried to highlight here, and we'll have to fix this for the next presentation to just make it a little bit darker. It shows up a little better on your screens, but it's washing out. There's red highlights on the parking spaces. City code does not include a minimum parking provision for fire stations. They are not a common building within the community. So evaluating that is largely based upon what types of use. We don't want to include additional parking stalls or require additional parking stalls for the very infrequent use. There are 34 stalls plus overflow, as in there is quite a bit of space on the site that is paved for turning radius, ease of use for the fire trucks and for training that could be used for overflow parking if the need should arise. The maximum number of firefighters on a standard call would be 15. There's far more than enough stalls for that. In fact, there's stalls on the rear and on the side that would be specifically designated for the firefighters. And while there is a large training room on site, the typical training would be around 35 persons. The site would not be manned or full-time manned for a number of years. It is an anticipatory and future planning as the community grows to ensure that we are able to meet the needs. And additionally, it's also set up for decontamination and other pieces that I'll discuss as we get into the interior of the building. The landscape plan included in your report was slightly amended. This has now been updated. That's largely because of a turn lane that is proposed along Galaxy Avenue. Because that turn lane is expected within the next decade or so, staff felt that it would be best to not include landscaping that would be just reaching its peak height, peak growth along that eastern side, and then have to come in and affect their root systems and likely tear them out. What is being encouraged as part of that project, or at that time, the city consider what landscaping could be installed. There are trails and there will be limited rooms. That is still being evaluated with that turn lane. Major pieces to note, I also noted in the staff report, are that there's extensive landscaping along the residential homes to the northwest of the site. That is purposeful to provide screening for not only the vehicles of firefighters when they arrive, but for the fire trucks themselves as they arrive. Creatively utilizing the trash enclosure and some fencing in this northwest should help prevent headlight wash into the backyards of neighboring residential properties. You can briefly see here, and hopefully it'll show up better on other slides, the stormwater infiltration in the north side of the site adjacent to Galaxy. Grading and erosion control plan is largely, or has been evaluated by the city engineer. There'll be minor tweaks as things proceed, largely on that eastern side because of the turn lane in the future. While the site is relatively flat, there is some elevation change to the west. So on that western side near the guest parking and the entry, there is a retaining wall, and that is kind of the reason why you're seeing a one-sided parking field, is because there is some elevation change there. Additionally, you're seeing some of the lines along the northwest side of the property up against the residential homes. That is a small berming area that is being retained. See if I can't point it out if the mouse cooperates. This area is some of the other area, or one of the more prominent areas with some grade change that is being retained as part of the project and is also being planted on. The stormwater plan now calls for underground infiltration, which is a improvement on the site. Planning Commission has seen prior projects where that has been an improvement for as well with private development. Traditionally, when the Planning Commission has evaluated whether to exceed building coverage, it has been in large part due to site intensity of use and for stormwater treatment. We now have different regulations that address the stormwater treatment, and these meet or exceed that. Previously, most of the stormwater generated on site proceeded onto city roadways and was not treated on the site, other than that already fell on grass. Now, the site is being graded to have all of it treated within a underground stormwater treatment facility. This is a brief diagram that was included in the staff report of the proposed turn lane. This is not at final design stage yet. Staff still needs to evaluate total widths, where trails would go, and how this might affect some of the site plan aspects. We're wanting to work through that prior to bringing this forward to Planning Commission and action. However, as that is a separate project for the future, we are also leaving the flexibility of moving that depending upon when design work can be completed. The interior of the fire station shows that there are a couple of bunkhouses in that lower building section towards the back that do face residential. Those would not be able to be seen by the backyards of those residential homes due to that berming and landscaping, so they're purposely screened. If there were expansion of bunkhouse areas, it would be into this area that is also extensively screened but is currently proposed for storage. You've got the decontamination areas in between the bays, and then general kitchen and standard fire station amenities, including rooms for decompressing after a call. I believe the narrative included from the applicant expresses some of their day-to-day operations within the actual fire station a little better than I'm able to. The upstairs, the one piece that I wanted to note here is on that northwest side, there is a window that goes into a conference room, but it is not an area that would be officed or used very often. The windows were purposely placed by the applicant and the architect to ensure that there are not windows overlooking people's homes and into the back yards of their property to ensure there is privacy. That's why there is also a large storage room in that back area that would largely be the space facing residential. The elevations are of typical fire station type construction. You'll see this in city buildings as a kind of standard with the types of materials. They've stuck with mostly brick as an exterior material with accent red banding. None of it's real bright, particularly don't want to, the Planning Commission has been considerate of colors facing residential in the past. This has some red banding, but it's very minimal in its vibrancy, I should say. The piece that I really wanted to emphasize out of this portion is the 2-foot height variance. This is specifically for training purposes. Staff evaluated whether a variance would even be required, as it is just for a mezzanine type area. It is not for the full building, and is really meant to be able to train firefighters at those greater heights. Staff felt that it was better to bring forward the variance, be open with the public about it, and display it. Normally, the 2-foot variance would not be something that would be required on a project like this, but we wanted to make sure we came forward. One of the other aspects that I wanted to just address, we have some perspective drawings that very clearly show that the screening of the HVAC units will be fully screened from off-site. So while you may see a small gap there, that is actually because of the perspectives. They don't need to be fully screened all the way up to the top with how far back they are from the screening. This would be to the rear of the structure. As I noted, the red banding is relatively minimal and largely towards the lower elevations where they be screened by landscaping, with the exception of this area here. This is the wall that would face The residential homes, as I noted, there's very minimal windows overlooking that back area that is purposeful to provide privacy for the homeowners behind the building. The building is also seeking, will not be seeking Green Globe certification, but will be built to Green Globe standards. The city typically does not move forward for certifications on something like this with our buildings because of the cost of getting those certifications. Building to the standards allows us to ensure that we are meeting environmental quality thresholds without having to burden the taxpayer with receiving a certification. Types of activities that will be occurred to achieve this will be efficiency in HVAC, low flow water features, high efficiency lighting. There will be a conduit for an electric vehicle charger towards the visitor section of the building. That is not being installed at this time. That building is not going to be utilized full-time, as I noted, for a number of years. Likely, as that comes forward and as electric vehicles become more prominent, that would become a feature that could be installed at that later date. Also wanted to emphasize the stormwater improvements on the site as they are above what is currently offered or present on the site. And I breezed right through a piece that I'd meant to. Bruce also wanted to bring up, or the Community Development Director wanted to provide some additional comments on process as this is a city facility.
Thanks, Alex. Madam Chair and Commissioners, I just wanted to mention that what Alex is doing excuse me, is walking through a prospective land use application for new fire facilities at Galaxy and 140th. At the same time, the City Council is still studying the capital improvement budget in the aggregate, not just this fire station, but all the capital improvements that they envision probably for the next certainly for the next 5 years. But there is an interest in moving this one along in a timely way. And funding is uncertain. So Alex wanted to introduce this, get feedback, answer questions, certainly. But it's my job to be a gatekeeper a little bit with this so it does not get ahead to council before it's time. So understand what it is we're trying to achieve here, and full disclosure, and we have the design staff with us, and they're all very capable. They actually are uniquely qualified to be designing fire stations. They've done it in multiple cities. So I just had to say that so we understand some of the grounding information required on this particular application. Thank you, Alex.
As Bruce noted, I did want to emphasize that the architect is present this evening, as is the fire chief. What staff would look for this evening from the Planning Commission are any of your comments, specifically regarding compliance to the comprehensive plan, the variances, or any other suggestions you have with site plan. One piece to note that the zoning and comprehensive plan do align, so it is guided for an institutional property as well.
Okay. Do we have questions and comments? Okay, Commissioner Scanlon.
Madam Chair, Alex, as far as the building itself and the banding and the coloring and so forth, I think it's kind of a subtle, and I'm talking specifically with the red, which is identifying, I guess, twofold, Apple Valley, but also as a fire, with the fire department. And I think it adds a little additional character to the building, and I don't have a concern with that. In terms of the variance component to this, I think the fire station where it's currently located is a strategically been chosen a while back, a number of years ago, and then to try to find a new site for it besides this, I guess that you would have to answer that question for me, but I would have to make an assumption that it would be difficult at this time with the current state of built-in within Apple Valley, that it would be difficult finding a new location for it. So, and for the purposes of the variance, it's minimal, and it's more for training purposes and so forth. So I don't find a concern with that. Is it, I'm not sure where you're in the process, if you've had any feedback from the neighboring properties yet, or had a discussion with them at all?
There is a slide on that. So, well, not required, Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Scanlon, well, not required, because this is just a site plan building permit authorization. And variances that don't not require a public hearing and therefore notice within 350 feet. Staff did encourage the fire department to reach out to neighboring properties. 350 feet would reach across Galaxy, which is not the audience that was needed to be, that input needed to be sought from. The neighboring properties, let me scroll all the way back. All of the properties that actually touch the site, including, I believe, some of these up here, and the fire chief can correct me on that if he wishes to speak, were notified and invited to an open house. One resident did attend. They expressed full support of the project. They have all been made aware and will be made aware throughout the process before construction occurs.
Yeah, well, you've kind of outlined the history of the site, and with the fact that they've been there for a number of years, that is the fire department, and they're pretty much well aware of the activity there. So, but overall, I think, you've done a great job from planning, building, mix of materials, and balance and design, and with the restrictions of the lot space that that they're working within, so. And I guess my final comment is appreciate the extra over and above effort, like you're just pointing out, the transparency of some of the things that we don't necessarily might not have to do, but it's, I think it sends the right message back to the overall business community within Apple Valley and so forth. So thanks, Alex.
Commissioner Schindler?
Yes, Madam Chair. Alex, I agree with Commissioner Scanlon. I think it's a very attractive building. I like that it's being pushed back a little bit, actually, rather than right up against the intersection. I don't know how much that's going to make a difference, but it couldn't hurt. I have no concerns over the height variance for that little piece. That shouldn't be an issue, I wouldn't think. And with regards to that, you said the possibility of a right turn lane. Is that what it is, a right turn lane? Going west on 140th,
Yes, that would be.
south on Galaxy to west on 140th, that's what you're talking about, right?
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Schindler, that is correct.
Now, is that a part of the project, or is that just they're setting it up so that when that happens, the site is prepared?
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Schindler, that is the discussion point that is occurring right now, is how much, where do we evaluate those impacts? It is not part of this project. It is not required as part of the fire station at all. If you recall, the project on 140th adding turn lanes was completed a couple of years ago. This was always anticipated to be completed. It's finding which funding cycle it would end up in, essentially.
Overall, I think it looks good, and I like the stormwater being taken care of on site. I think it's a big improvement.
Thank you. Anybody else? No?
Just one quick observation,
Absolutely.
Madam Chair. With respect to the usage and the anticipation of how many people would be needed to staff once it's fully operational, once it's fully expanded, I guess that would, sounds like there's adequate parking. That was just the only concern that I had was once it's, are we talking about once fully staffed, once fully operational? You know, making sure that there is adequate parking for that. But if I understood you correctly, everybody's satisfied that there is. It's just, that was, again, my only concern.
Eric Kurtz, Commissioner Mahowald. Yeah, that is something we'll definitely want to speak with the fire department about. I believe that it is adequate, but it is something we can emphasize. I believe for that type of eventual operation, more of the guest type parking where they want to make it open to the community would be utilized for the day-to-day rather than the probably more coveted spaces for the firefighters that are closer to the facilities that they need to be working on. But that is a discussion point that we can clarify before the next meeting.
Alex, I have a few. I love the fact that they won't be able to cut through there anymore. I live in that neighborhood pretty close, and I see it quite often. So that's, everything about it, I think, is a plus. I think the building is absolutely beautiful. And a couple of questions, as I was reading this the other day, when overflow parking, there's that skating rink that's north of it. That could always be used, couldn't it, for if there's overflow, if it ever came to that? The existing trees there now, it looks like the southwest area would probably have to be bulldozed down quite a bit. Do you know how many trees are going to be bulldozed down about?
Chair Kurtz, I don't have an exact number.
Okay,
I can bring that back to the next meeting.
okay,
Fire stations, I noted this more in the report and didn't want to go into too much detail on it here,
Sure.
but fire stations are an expensive building. And while the building will be required to meet the 2.5% for a typical commercial, fire stations are not the one-to-one comparison that you see for most facilities. For instance, this is probably 3 or 4 times more expensive than your typical office and garage. And so we have done an evaluation of the landscaping requirements. This is still going to be far overplanted
okay.
than what typical requirements would be for a similar site. So while there are trees being removed, eventually the tree count will be significantly higher than what it is today, tree and plant count.
Okay. Well, that was kind of my next question. This would be the only fire station like this in the city of Apple Valley, correct? I mean, they would never do anything to the other ones or anything.
Chair Kurtz, I believe that would be a better question for the chief.
Sure, and I'll ask them that. And are there comparable ones in other cities? Does Burnsville have a training center like this or anything else? They do, okay. Because I
I
was
believe
just
the
going,
architect can answer those. They've specialized in this style of building.
okay, because I was going to say that it would be nice that if we did workshops or whatever for surrounding cities who needed training, you know, or something like that. But anyway, that is my opinion, and I think it looks really, really good, and it's an addition to the city of Apple Valley. So would you like to speak?
Let's go to there.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Quinn Hudson. I'm a principal with CNH Architects. With me tonight also Brooke Jacobson, under the principal, as well as Fire Chief Chuck Russell. Pretty much, Alex did a great job of presenting it. I'm happy to certainly answer any of their questions. I'll hit a couple of the ones that have already been asked. You know, one was certainly, the most recent was discussion of parking that may change over time if the service model changes. As mentioned, we do a lot of fire stations projects. We have them all over the metro area. We've designed over 18 fire stations locally. As it changes, actually the parking needs go down. The needs currently with the model, the pay-on-call response is the highest parking need that the facility would need along its life. So we're real comfortable with what's there at that point. Trying to think if there's other questions that came up that if you could remind me of other things you'd like me to address. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Yes, Edward. I have one question, since I brought the comment up about the banding and the use of the red accenting and so forth. Is that, and when we've run into this with other buildings and with fading and so forth, and is that going to be like an anodized type material that, or that
Yeah, it is-
produces less effect? Because red is one of those colors that is difficult to deal with.
Madam Chair and Commissioner, absolutely. I'm quite aware what you're getting at, that red does fade to pink. And if it was a fade, no, this is a warranted long-term life pre-finish coated material.
Okay, thank you.
And so it will stay red. And we have been using some amount of reds, a variety of quantity. You know, as we mentioned, Burnsville has a somewhat a bit larger facility, and they have a large portion of red, but they're also in an industrial area. Anytime we're working within a residential, we try to stay, you know, a little bit more limited on how much that we have. Training tower was another question that was asked. That is, of all the current projects we have, they all have training towers, and the height issue is to get that fourth story so that the firefighters can train off the aerial ladder. Anything lower that is too low for them to reach up at the right angle.
Makes sense. Anybody else? It's very tasteful.
Yeah, thank you very
Building,
much.
very pretty.
Yep, thanks.
Chief Russell, would you like to come speak?
Thank you. Madam Commissioner, Commissioner members, or Madam Chair, Commissioner members, I'm Chuck Russell, I'm the Fire Chief for Apple Valley. I did want to take a moment to answer some of the questions. You came up with some very good questions to make sure that you have a full understanding. So the first one talked about the location of the site itself. So if you picture Apple Valley, it's almost like a big square with the corner cut off. Where would you want to put a station that would serve most of the residents? Very quickly would be right in the middle of town, which is right where Station 2 is. And it's got a wonderful north-south with Galaxy and a great east-west access with 140th Street. So once we leave, there's no residential roads to be going on. Nice, a little higher speed roads for access to get across town. So if there was a central station, Station 2 would be the perfect location for it. So that's why we're putting this amount of effort into this station itself.
Well, I live close by, so stay put.
Yeah, definitely. We like that location. At one time, the city was investigating, so how do we cover a little bit differently? Do we add another station and then maybe move Station 2 up a little further north, move one to the south, but that would mean a whole nother fire station to take care of, a couple more trucks, another 25 firefighters. We decided that's a difficult thing to accomplish. So we really wanted to maintain that station or make a new station in that location where it's at. So it's an ideal spot. Currently, our project right now is at about the 50% point as far as design phase. And what we were really looking for with this meeting was input from city staff and from the Planning Commission. We're at a point where it's still easy to make changes and recommendations. We felt if we got too much further along, oh, I would be saying, wow, what a challenge that would be. We want to listen to what your input is, and we really definitely want to listen to the city staff input. So we're doing what the city wants in this building. We want to be as transparent. And let's face it, while we have great architects that are working for us, we're firefighters. We don't build buildings, so we don't entirely know what we're doing as far as that. We need help. We're asking for the help to make sure that we're following all the rules and suggestions. So.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I don't remember the sidewalk. Is the sidewalk staying put, correct? The sidewalk shouldn't be moving anywhere, should they be?
Chair Kurtz, no, the sidewalks are not moving at all, other than what could potentially be affected by the turn lane here. It would be replaced. There's a trail along 140th that actually, through some of the review, as Chief Russell noted, staff suggested the sidewalk connection down to 140th that you're seeing here for the visitor entrance. At this time, we can't say how wide this sidewalk would be or where the sidewalk would be on the eastern side until that turn lane is designed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. City staff has already made a number of suggestions that we've incorporated in what you've seen today, so definitely timely. Overflow parking, a few times a year we get large crowds at the station, as you probably know, when we do our open houses. Overflow parking at Galaxy Park and also to Scott Park to the south, which is across the 140th intersection, are common ones that are used. We don't do it very often. We didn't want to try and fit enough parking on site for those couple events that we have. But as Quinn mentioned, right now, our highest number of parking is where we're at right now. If we did become a fully staffed station or a full-time station, those requirements would go down, so. Mentioned the cost of the building. One of the things that you may not realize in fire stations and even police stations, the requirements that get stacked onto them. There's something called a tornado shelter that's required in the building. Extensive requirements as far as how tornado-proof that section of the building is, and it even has to have a restroom in it that's functional by itself, so it's got pressurized water tank stored, so you can flush it so many times based on occupancy of the building. Things like that add significantly to the cost. Plus, we're also parking relatively large vehicles indoors, and that just adds to the square footage and also. And the other training features that we have, one thing that Apple Valley does is we do recruit training with 3 cities, Farmington, Lakeville, and Apple Valley. Every year, we bring them on site, and it takes about 6-7 months in order to train up a new firefighter. And we do most of the training here in Apple Valley. We do it at Station 1 now. You make it work. The features that Quinn has offered and we have included into the building allow that training to be much more comprehensive, and I would say even safer, because we're not just climbing on top of a building, laddering. We're actually using the features that have safety incorporated in them in order to better train those recruit firefighters.
So why was Station 2, if I may ask, why was that chosen over Station 1? Because if I remember, Station 1 is over by 42, correct? Is that Station 1?
Or by Bachman's there,
Yes.
yes. So
So that land seems to be, is it larger or not as large as the?
let's go back to that picture of Apple Valley being a square and this Station 2 being right in the middle with great access north, south, and east and west. If you look at Hayes and 42, no really good north-south at all. You can go up Hayes, but it's a 30-mile-an-hour residential road. It's a collector, so it can take a little better. You got the high school to the north, so you have traffic jams twice a day during the school year, during the weekdays. And we have our own challenges getting firefighters in the station at certain times of the day, certainly rush hours and when school's in session. We just know it affects our response. That's just a known.
Okay.
You're right, a little better situated as far as size and such, but Station 2 is where you asked if we were going to do the same thing to the other stations. That's not our intention. We'll maintain those stations and upgrade as necessary, but this would be our central station. We would not do the same treatments,
Okay.
anywhere near the same treatment at the other 2 stations. We have no plans for that.
Okay. Thank you.
That was all the points, all the questions that I kind of heard from you, unless you have any additional. I appreciate the input.
Anybody? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Oh, is that it? That's it. Oh, boy, did that land like a thud. Well, I do have one question for Quinn. Aren't the red elements, you have multiple doors, or you obviously have overhead doors, but you have multiple doors, and how else would they stand out? How else would people know where to approach a rather long building if it wasn't for a little bit of color or other treatment? Can you just respond to the design?
Madam Chair and Commissioners and Mr. Nordquist, yes, yeah, I think the red is definitely something that helps tell the community it's a fire station. And that's part of the goal of having those little bit of accents, and particularly like on the doors in the front, we have bifolding doors for quick response, and in the back would be overhead doors. But the red kind of does help find that, if Mr. Yes.
Thank you.
Nothing wrong with bright colors, right?
Nothing wrong with Apple Valley Red,
That's
or
right.
Fire Red, or Red Number X. Anyways, I think I can certainly escape out of this, and
And move on to item number 6, other business.
we are. This is one of those times of the year where we do not have a planning commission meeting the first week of the month. Our next regular meeting is July 20th at 7 p.m. And then we do have we do have a council meeting tomorrow and one also on July 14th. So that's all I've got as updates this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nordquist. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Motion made by Commissioner Scanlon and seconded by Commissioner Schindler. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.
Was checked out already.